Welcome back, everyone. How was the morning session? Yeah, lots of nodding heads, lots of nodding heads. Give yourselves a round of applause for coming back. Welcome back. Well, you're going to be on in a second, so it's a good thing you're here. Well, listen, friends, it's been an exciting morning. I hope you're feeling inspired. But the big thing about inspiration is that how do we put these things into place? How do we actually action all these exciting conversations that will happen and spurred on this morning? Now, we're going to hear a little bit about that and hear about how an expanded EIC should look like, right, Mark? Mark, I heard a conversation yesterday. Anita Crone may have called you out as the person who said misbehave. Is that correct? Another panel with misbehaving guests. We like that here. This is becoming a trend of the EIC Summit. You thought policy was boring. Think not. We're giving it to you here today and yesterday as well. But listen, this afternoon session, we're going to have an exciting thing happening just after this fantastic panel conversation. We're going to talk about EU's innovators, women innovators specifically. We're going to have 3 categories which will be announced. So stay where you are. Enjoy this session. We've got exciting things coming throughout the afternoon. You're in the right place. So to kick things off with this panel, we're going to invite on Mark Ferguson, who is the Director General of Science Foundation Ireland and former chair of the EIC board and an EIC ambassador. Mark Ferguson, everyone. Mark.
Thank you.
Good to see you. So Mark, your guests will be Michaela, Kršková, Chief Innovation Officer of the Slovak Republic EIC board member. Here you go. Thank you so much. Anne Glover, Chief Executive and co-founder of Amadeus Capital Partners. Give it up for Anne Glover. And of course, Enrico Olmos, founder and CEO of Multiverse Computing. Here we go. You can second guess. No worries. Thank you. Oh, Philippe. You can be Enrique if you like.
I don't have the goods.
Very good. Okay, thank you very much, Philippe, for standing in from SiPearl, another wonderful company. So we're going to talk about what the EIC should look like in the future. And I was part of the Heitor group, and we made a number of recommendations in the report. So I'm going to kick off, then I'm going to ask each of the panel members to say something. But we are going to misbehave. So about halfway through this, the cameras are going to go round, and I'm going to ask the audience to ask the panel any question they want. If you don't respond to that, 2 things could happen. Either I will ask you some questions, or I will ask the panel questions because you are being shy. So please think of something you would like to ask my 3 esteemed colleagues here, and we'll open that up about halfway through. So let me begin. In the Heitor report, we made a number of recommendations, but for me personally, the most important thing is to grow the EIC fund so that we can really scale companies and crowd in more private sector investment. For that, in my opinion, the EIC fund needs to grow to be at least 30 billion, and the European Commission needs to move from being the sole funder to a limited partner so that we can attract in private capital. And if we do this well, then there should be a very large fund, and there should be excellent folks there as limited partners. And why is this important? Because in the United States, venture capital is about 1% of GDP. In Europe, venture capital is 0.1% of GDP. That's a 10-fold difference. So to bridge the gap with the US, we need at least 100 billion more in Europe than we currently have. That's the first point. And the biggest source of capital is pension funds, insurance funds. Pension funds in the United States invest 20% of the venture capital funding. In Europe, they invest 8%. So the big pockets of capital are not investing in VC funds in Europe to the same extent that they are in the US. And my third example is if you are from Germany, you may be interested to know that US pension funds own 5 billion euros of assets in German startups. German pension funds own less than 100 million assets in German startup funds. So when those German companies do really well, the teachers in California get a better pension, but the teachers in Germany do not. So we need to change how pension funds and large slugs of capital that are there and in the insurance industry view venture capital, view EIC as a vehicle for leveraging that capital so that we can really scale companies in Europe. We can write tickets that are up to 100 million. We can keep companies here. Why do companies go to the US? It's because the large pockets of capital are there. So there's tons of other things we can do with the EIC. We can talk about ARPA funding and lots of other stuff. But for me, scaling is really important. Now I'm going to turn to the panel. I've said my 2 cents worth. You chaired a very interesting session yesterday where everybody put their 2 cents worth in about what the EIC should look like. Tell me what came out of that panel and what you think should happen with the EIC in the future.
Thank you, Mark. Indeed, I see many familiar faces in the audience that I spent some quality time with yesterday. I chaired one of those stakeholder sessions alone, 2 of them with my colleague Karsten Dreyer from the EIC board, and we spent a lot of time basically just asking questions and receiving some valuable feedback from beneficiaries, EIC ambassadors, and the wider sort of EIC network. And it was very interesting to see how, I think, permeating that whole discussion is the sense of urgency. While I agree that Europe has everything it takes to succeed, I would disagree on one point: it doesn't have the time. And that sense of urgency was very much present in all those stakeholder sessions that we held yesterday. Basically, I think it really matters what we do in the next weeks, months, a year, and it will really truly affect even the future of the EIC, but the wider innovation policy of the EU. It will affect the way our kids and our grandkids will live on the continent and in the world. So I would stress that importance of time, but that was very, that created that sense of urgency in the stakeholder sessions yesterday. But also, I think what it was helpful in was that it provided a mirror and a reflection of some of the discussions that we're having within the EIC board and that we've heard on the stage here as well at the EIC Summit and that we're hearing from the European Commission. But particularly with the view to the EIC, one good message is that no one wants to cancel the EIC. None of the stakeholders that came to speak to us, even though they were very open and at times very critical, none of the messaging was, do away with the EIC, it's useless. The very opposite is true. So I think the consensus is that the EIC has a tremendous potential to lead the innovation policy in the EU, and it is a success story, despite all its maybe shortcomings and things that could be improved. And so it needs a few modifications, and I would basically categorize those into 2 broader pools, one related to policy orientation and some of the other measures related to execution. One interesting thing that was said was, you can have all the missions and all the strategies and all the policies sort of and good intentions in place, but if you fail on execution, it's all for nothing. So those 2 discussions were very much related, and I'm sorry I have my notes with me because there was so much content. I put it together for all my EIC board colleagues and the EICMEA people to look into, because I think this is something that we should be doing more frequently and more systematically to really get out there and face that feedback and face that criticism, take it in and really consider it, I think, deeply, because I think it's very helpful what many of the people in our groups were saying. I would divide it, I can expand on that later in more detail, but what related to policy, the number one issue, and both of these I can divide into 4 broader issues. On policy, it's basically increased firepower of the EIC, connected to what you just mentioned. So whether that's related to scaling the EIC fund or just basically giving more funding to the EIC to distribute. Move towards risk. So there was I think, a general consensus that the EIC perhaps has moved a little bit more towards the safer bets instead of taking the riskier bets where the sweet spot of the EIC should be. So don't compete with private capital, but actually move where that money is needed. So addressing market failure and also addressing strategic areas for the EU. And there was a lot of talk about boosting Pathfinder and transition and really focusing there. Another one, broader area related to policy was fix the cracks in the system. So there's a lot of concern that there's a lot of breakthrough innovation that falls through the cracks between the different programs because they're not seamlessly integrated. And there was a wider complaint about, basically, I mean, this is something that we hear all the time, is that a lot of non-coordination between different initiatives within the Horizon Framework Program. A lot of sort of ring fencing of different networks and activities that happen. And the last one would be actively source the breakthroughs. So don't just sit there and don't just wait for the stellar startups and projects to come to the EIC. You actually have to actively source these projects and look into working more closely with TTOs, with incubators at universities all over Europe. Give more power to the program managers to work more like ARPA program managers, and work and leverage the ambassador and the NCP network more, and actually care who does the work. Who is the NCP in each and every country? Don't complain about widening, not participating enough if we don't take the care to actually put the right people in those positions.
Great.
And I will come back to execution. There's a lot there, so.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you for the feedback from everyone. Anne, you've got a lot of experience with the private sector capital, and obviously EIC wants to be synergistic with that. And you've also got lots of experience in the UK of trying to liberate pension funds into the VC area. Tell us what you think the EIC should do in the future.
Well, the first thing you've done right is that you've required matching capital from the private sector. So don't change that. So I want to give you great credit for that. The liberating of private capital from pension funds is essential. The argument you made is the shift that got political attention in the UK, which was from arguing that entrepreneurs need it, which the politicians sort of said, yeah, but why, to our pensioners are suffering because they are not getting the returns from the innovation of taxpayers' money being spent on research and development. Yeah. That link needed to be made. It's now made. So it's made here, it's made in the UK. It's been 25 years basically managing out risk in the pension fund, so don't expect it to change quickly. But at the same time, it's really important that these skunk works within pension funds are given support. So while I completely applaud your goal of 30 billion and including private capital, I would suggest that you might want to consider actually forcing the pension funds who allocate to you to allocate equally as much to the private sector partners that you're working with. Because if we're not able to raise the money, you won't have lead investors too. So I think that we have to work together in partnership to make this work. And the thing that's so striking about the US venture capital system is its churn. It's constantly spinning out new managers. Managers are succeeding and failing, and the tolerance for failure is an essential part of the US system. And so while the EIC is a fantastic success, and it's 3 or 4 years in, it's still in its honeymoon period. Yeah. So it's going to kind of come to a point when some of these companies aren't going to work and it's not going to be quite as rosy. And it's really important that everybody tolerates that risk of failure and that we look to what Carlos Moiras said this morning, telling the stories of the winners, because the winners will make up for the losers. And we have to accept that there will be losers, but the winners are really important. They're the ones who will create the jobs. So I think that the foundations are there. The fact that we have a great seed and early stage ecosystem in Europe has been 25 years in the making. And now we need to scale up there. But we will need layers beyond that, Series D, Series E, and eventually capital markets. So we need the ladder of finance that the US has in depth in order to make this a success. So this is it's absolutely urgent, but it's a 20-year journey. It's not a 5-year, and we've got to realize that. So that's my message.
Very good, very good. So I think working more closely in private with the private investors, really important. The ladder of finance, the urgency, really important. Philippe, you have been a recipient of EIC funding, and you've been growing your company, SiPearl. Give us your perspective on A, what's worked and what hasn't worked, and B, what do you think we should do better?
So thanks for the invitation first. So that's a long story that I will try to make short. Just to introduce SiPearl, so we are a semiconductor company. We are building high-performance microprocessor for supercomputing, data center, and inference area. Now, our link with EU, before the link with EIC, in 2018, we were at the EIB Advisory Hub to coach us to prepare the initial business plan, and SiPearl has been set up in 2020 as the first private entity coming from an Edge 2020 research consortium, which was EPI, European Processor Initiative. We won EIC in December 2021, and EIC has been one of the contributors of a big Series A we did in Series A, in 2023, which was, let's say, beyond 100 million euros. On board, we got EIC, we got EIB, which is quite unique in Series A. We got the French state, and we got private investor arm in UK, a tech giant in US, and Evident, which is building supercomputers. And on top of this, part of the market we address is driven by your HPC, which your HPC GU, which is also, let's say, connected to EU. So it has been slow, it has been long, it has been much more slower than we could have been done achieving US with private money, but finally we did it. So that's the good point. So thanks and congratulations for, let's say, all the EU representatives in this room, because thanks to this, we are still alive. We're about to start a production, and we have built something which is unique in Europe. That's the first step. Now, what we should do now, and that's part of the not the issues, but what we see is that we're trying to scaling up. Semiconductor is very expensive. We need something like 200 million euros to build a platform. We start working on a Series B, and when you target 100 million euros, it's just waste of time to discuss with investors, which can do, let's say, 500K, 1 million, or 2 millions. And unfortunately, one of the issues I see today in the EIC ecosystem, which is, let's say, quite good to seed, but to scale up, I will be happy to see in this room investors from Asia, from the Middle East, or from US. And to my knowledge, they don't exist yet. So that's the first one. So you should leverage the huge brand you have now with EIC, because it's seen on a worldwide basis, and I'm in Taiwan next week, as the largest deep tech investor in Europe, so that's the good stuff. But try to attract other investors, and we know that the future to scale up is not going to be only with European fund. So that's the first one. And second one, recommendation, you have kind of so-called mother company or something like this, which is EU and EIB, which can have a huge impact also through, for instance, EIF. Now, as an LP, so EIF is investing in fund, and we would like to see this fund also investing in startups. So far, for the discussion we had with them, it was not very successful because they don't see necessarily the link in between EU, EIB, EIF, and startups, while EIC is part of, let's say, the same family. So this does not work yet. And also what is missing, because we know, I said that you will not find enough budget in super tech in Europe to find it, so you need to leverage other tools. And other tools could be all the corporate investors you have in Europe, because there are plenty of very, let's say, nice companies, I won't give any names, which have access to grant, support from EU for, let's say, public order or tax credit, grants, etc. My suggestion is just push this big corporate in Europe to reinvest part of the grants and the support they have in EU in their corporate fund, and these corporate funds will invest in startup and scale up. And this, let's say, this is missing. Don't try to be only on your own in silo, but try to federate foreign investors and European corporates.
Thank you very much. That's all part of your ladder of finance in a way, and getting the corporates involved, getting better coordination with the EIB, EIF, thinking about how funds that invest in things like the EIC might also co-invest in the private sector so that we can have this good leverage effect. Okay, who in the audience would like to ask the panel a question? Can you let me have a look at the audience, because there's just a mass of lights in my eyes.
Yes.
So if you'd like to ask a question, please either stand up, put your hand up.
Yes,
Over here. Okay, yes, please. There's a microphone roving. Here we go. Over here. Microphone's coming towards you. This is a real test of my eyesight, by the way, and the cap doesn't help. Even though this is trying to shield out the light. This is my EU Supporters Club hat. Go ahead.
Krasen Dimitrov, Volterra, Bulgaria. Founder and innovator, EIC beneficiary. What are the plans to reduce bureaucracy in the EIC? because it's taking 13 months to finalize our agreement. That's not normal.
Very good. Okay. So I will not speak for the executives in the EIC or the board of the EIC, since I have nothing to do with it. But what I will say is it needs to be a timeline that matches the private sector timeline, and it should be measured in weeks and months, not years. And I think there's a job of work to be done there in terms of simplification and speeding up. Fully on board, and speak to Jean-David Malo afterwards. Okay, who else wants to ask a question? Here, in the center, please. Microphone over here. You're getting warmed up now. Yep.
Hello. Wow. Mika Skarp from Finland. I would like to ask about that idea having the corporates more involved in funding startups. That do you have some kind of ideas that how could that work in practice? I understand how these insurance companies and pension funds could do it, but how about the corporations? How could they be more involved?
Great. Anyone from the panel like to pick that? Go ahead.
One of the, I mean, this is not my idea. I think this has been floating around for a while, but and everyone is talking about it. No one has kind of put it to work yet. But you know, the EIC portfolio should be offered up to the big corporations that are looking to innovate. And I think one of the things that corporates can do, and this was something that came out of the discussions yesterday, was, you know, we get exposed as beneficiaries to corporates like every once in a while in corporate days, open days. But that's it, and then there's no sort of continuous exposure to big corporations that are looking to source innovation from the EIC portfolio. So I think one of the things is buy European-funded innovation. This is your sweet spot if you're a corporate. Of course, you can have your venture arm, which many corporations do. But I think one of the things that we can do is behave like a fund. Sorry, as a former VC. Behave like a fund, like you put your portfolio out there, you make it very clear which companies you've invested in, what type of positions or talent these companies are looking for, but also what products and services are they offering, and they're looking to test or deploy their technology with a corporate partner. So I think this is somewhere where the corporates can be very helpful, and I think we should try and match make more between the EIC portfolio and the corporates.
Philippe, you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, because I have a kind of real-life experience on this. So far, for the corporate investors we have discussed, so we have a couple on board. So thanks to them. For the others, it's small ticket, so it's good to see the startup, maybe to manage an acquisition after a couple years. I can list a very good one in Germany, RBVC, Robert Bosch Venture, because they really have this culture of, let's say, investing in tech, but without any strong incentive from EU, I don't think they will manage big tickets. And for the example I give, if EU is giving to a big player, for instance, 1 billion in terms of grant and support, and this happened, for instance, through the CHIPS Act, just force them to reallocate 10%, so 100 million in their corporate fund. First, it will facilitate EIC bureaucracy, if it exists, because the corporate will do the job of selecting it, but they will selecting the startup, they will just be obliged to see them, to finance them, and maybe later acquisition or specific, let's say, a business agreement with them.
Interesting idea. Anne, did you want to add anything?
I mean, I agree that they're an amazing source of capital and insight. I think that they ebb and flow according to their own economics, and so they are a really important partner, but I wouldn't rely on them as developing the ecosystem. So I think they are very important for individual companies, but my experience is that they unless they are really well integrated and independent of the corporate agenda, they are quite fickle.
Yep, it's fickle, and I just had a personal experience. One of the interesting things of having a corporate investor is if your exit point for the company is actually a sale and your corporate investor isn't interested in buying the company, you have actually raised a hurdle, because the first question you will be asked by all the other corporates you're trying to sell your company to is, why is this company that invests in you not buying you? So that's just something to be aware of. It's not a problem, but it's something to be aware of. Who else would like to ask a question? Yes, in the front row here. Here we go.
Hello, I'm the innovator from Slovakia, and I would be interested in what sectors do you see to be focused on based on the change in geostrategic or change in geopolitical situation. And I would also have one comment to STEP document where I was quite surprised that technologies that can enable Europeans to become independent in the area of financial situation or financial technology were missing there. So can you please comment on these two things?
Okay, so what are the new opportunities and what about financial stuff? I'm going to start and then I'm going to throw the panel. I think with the current regime in the United States, there is a huge opportunity for Europe in the whole of the climate tech space. And if we don't take it, China is currently taking it, and China will be the leader. So for probably the first time in the last 10 or 20 years, I think there's a real chance of attracting American entrepreneurs and investors in the climate tech space, broadly writ, to Europe as opposed to the US. Now, that's my 2 cents worth. I'm going to ask Anne first, and then we'll come to the rest of the panel.
Well, I think that one of the perhaps hidden opportunities is that all the fuss about generative AI has basically sucked the oxygen out of all the other approaches to artificial intelligence. And if you look at the mathematical disciplines and the software disciplines in Europe, across the board, we are absolutely on par with the US. So there's a tendency to want to give up, okay, AI has been lost because the generative AI foundation models are all based in the US. Frankly, I don't think that it's been lost at all. I think they are going to become commodities. I think they are utilities on which we can build great tech. So I would actually encourage you all to ignore the noise and actually look at where AI is, because it will change the world. But it's not going to change the world in the way that everybody expects, because those foundational models, yes, they're hoovering up data and they're going to be, but they are going to compete down to be utilities. So don't give up on AI just because there's a lot of noise coming from the US. That's my message.
Great message. Michaela, what do you think?
I don't want to be a grumpy Eastern European on the panel, but I am. So I'm just gonna.
You're going to be a grumpy Eastern European?
You know
No.
how we are. And being close to that Eastern friends that we have on our borders. I think anything defense and dual use related. I think we're going to have a renaissance of dual use and defense technologies, and that can be everything and anything that you guys are working on and more. So I think that's a threat, but also a great opportunity for
I think it's
Europe.
a really interesting point. I mean, there's going to be more money spent on security, defense, and the challenge for Europe is that the peace dividend from underinvesting in defense or security, that peace dividend, which translated into an economic dividend, is over. And we need to get the economic dividend from dual use, i.e. investment in defense and security that spills over into the civilian sector. I think that's a real opportunity.
There was a really interesting sort of specific measure that was suggested yesterday. Send an email to all the EIC portfolio and ask them to self-identify as dual use or defense tech.
But everything is dual use.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Everything is dual use. Why?
Everything is dual use. I mean, an army is healthy. DARPA is one of the biggest funders of breast cancer research in the United States. The army needs to be healthy. Philippe, you have a view?
I fully share what has been said. So AI, dual, semiconductor, of course, because I need to sell my business.
Of course.
I would like to officially thank Mr. T, who is our best salesman. He gives us a huge window of opportunity to do something. We have the best engineers, we have the best scientists. Now let's ensure that EU does not become an incubator of US ideas. So we test in Europe, it's cheap because engineers are 4 times cheaper. And if it takes off, we, let's say, bring them back to US. So for this, we need a specific, let's say, specific capital. But with all the announcements we got in the past let's say, weeks. Let's say one of the derivatives of the French EIC Summit was 300 billion for data center, 800 billion for defense, so which is very good news. But we just have to ensure that this money is recycled in Europe and not sent to US. To avoid what happens 20 years ago in the internet days, very nice startups in Europe, but most of the money went back to feed the GAFAM and to keep on, let's say, feeding the beast, which today is on the other side of the ocean and not on our side.
Anne, you wanted to add to that?
I do, and there's something else I want to mention about, I really love the message of unity that came out, but there's another message, which is we need to be open for business in the way the US is closing down, and that means that we need to figure out how to do business with the developing world and the emerging markets. And given the way the US is behaving, it is actually a huge opportunity for us to reach out. And to your point about fintech, if you look at what India is doing in fintech, it is amazing. And we should be collaborating internationally and taking our place in the world as the trading bloc that is unified but also open for business. So that's a message I want to put.
Great. We have a minute left. Who wants a question? Here, the lady on the side. Down here we go. And if you're quick, we'll take another one over here. So be quick.
I'm super quick. My name is Mona Buzat. I come from Cluj, and my question is, where do cities sit in the future of the policies of EIC?
Very good. Where do cities sit? And we're going to take another question over here. Where's the lady? There we go. Pass her the microphone. We're going to get a couple of questions here, and then we have 45 seconds to answer it.
Thank you. I think that there is much more work to do from the demand side in sector where the final...
It's working. It's working. It's working.
In the sector where public sector is the final recipient of innovation, I think that the validation from the public sector who has the clear vision and value in optimized taxpayer money, I think that incentive to the public demand needs to be increased.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, we've got to be very quick here. So where do cities sit and what's the role of public procurement?
So I think
5 seconds.
Cities, regions, and national ecosystems absolutely have to be part of the story of the EIC, and I think we need to do much more work on that, reflecting Carlos Moeda's note from today. I completely agree.
Very good. Anne?
Cities have a very important role in creating convening activities and infrastructure. If you get both of those right, then entrepreneurs will come and build a cluster. That's what matters.
Very good. Philippe?
Public procurement, that's easy. US is doing it, China is doing it, Japan is doing it, with, for instance, the Rapidus program. So 3 words, European by Act.
Very good. And I'm going to add a final sentence, and that is all agencies, including the EIC, run challenge programs. And most of the challenge programs around the world give a prize of cash. But actually, the biggest prize that the European Commission can give is either an order, meaning a procurement order, or a change in the regulation, or permission, because that's what governments in the European Union do. So if we really want to be innovative, let's run challenge competitions where the prize is permission to do something, a change in the regulation, or a procurement, a big order from the European Commission. And with that, we're over time. I'd like to thank the panel very much indeed. I'd like to thank you for asking questions. We're done.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you to our wonderful guests. Go and have a chat with them, but not just yet, because we're going to kick things off in just a second with...